Hi, this is Charlie Seymour Jr., and I'm here with Dick Wohlschlaeger, pastor of Swarthmore Presbyterian Church. Wait till you learn how he came here, what his background is, what his hopes and dreams are for the chancel reconstruction and the brand new pipe organ. We are going to share some things with you. You want to watch this. Okay. Well, before we get to Swarthmore Presbyterian Church, your time here, and a discussion about the new chancel, the new pipe organ, which is very exciting for all of us. And we're here in your beautiful office. It's a very busy church, so we may hear people going by us, which is great, because know how busy it is. Can you tell us a little about your Navy career and how it led you to be called to the ministry?
When I felt called to the ministry at the age of 39, 40, I thought that perhaps the Navy and everything else had been a series of missteps. And it wasn't until later that I realized that everything had kind of played a part in that. I've often told the story that when I was about 10 years old, my grandmother, who was the wife of a farmer, planted to the ground and the earth, said that you'll be a minister someday, even if it takes you till you're 40. So when I heard myself saying, literally, maybe I should go to seminary when I was 40, the practical side of me said, I need to check this out because I don't want to be doing this because I'm remembering something that my grandmother said years ago.
Right, something that she planted.
Right. In fact, I think it was planted in lots of ways. When I was a little kid, we played church in the church at church picnics. When I was in the Navy, in fact, we did services. I worked with the chaplain. We did Christmas services. We had a little choir. So I was playing church even in the Navy. And when I was teaching, one of the things that I would end up teaching would be the Old Testament as literature. And I always remember being kind of tuned into that again, and it felt familiar and good. So the Navy, and in a way, the Navy experience played into it in a sense of the people we met. We met some people who are dear friends to this day when we were in Annapolis. They were Roman Catholic. They grew up in the Philadelphia area. And we were, as they called us, the first publics they had known because we had gone to public school. And I remember our friend asking me if Protestants had funerals. And it made me very defensive. In a sense that I wanted to defend where I had come from and my Reformed Protestant faith. So all of those things sort of play a role. And so there were experiences in the Navy time that helped. I don't think that the Navy in particular did something, but certainly through those years I had experiences that helped.
And was this was active service in the Navy, and then you became an instructor in Annapolis?
Yes.
Okay.
I was drafted during the Vietnam War era. I was 25, I was married, and I was teaching high school English.
Wow.
But I didn't have children, and I wasn't teaching math or science, so I was still vulnerable. It was before the lottery. And at 26, you became ineligible. So I was drafted, decided that I wanted to have some choice in the matter, so I applied to Navy OCS. My college roommate had done that, and he always researched things carefully.
Yes.
So I thought, he's already done the research, this must be a good place to go. I did. I was accepted, went to Newport, Rhode Island for 4.5 months of training. Most of the people in my class were 24, 25, many of us with master's degrees, because we had already been out and doing education and stuff. So then I was sent to a ship in California, and I was on board that ship for 1.5 years, applied for shore duty, and received orders to teach at the Naval Academy. But I had to extend my 3-year commitment to 5 years to accept. I did. It was a good thing. We loved our years there.
And you were teaching at Annapolis when you decided to go to seminary?
No.
No.
I did. I taught there 3 years as an officer, 7 more as a civilian professor. I was working on a PhD, but in my heart knew that wasn't where I wanted to go. I took a job in Washington with the Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation, another, quote, misstep, but it was an administrative position, that in fact helped prepare me for the administrative side of ministry. Somewhere in there, in that time, I felt called, and that fateful Saturday morning said maybe I should go to seminary, and Kathy said, well then why don't you?
Yes.
And that was the turning point.
Kathy, of course, is your wife of how
Yep.
many years while we're recording this?
Now 48.
I'm sorry to ask that question. That might have been the toughest question. I want to make sure you got that one
no,
right.
well, it was just 48.
Just 48.
A few days ago.
There you go. Congratulations on that. What had you known about SPC, Swarthmore Presbyterian Church, before the pastor position was made available, before you found out about that specifically? Anything?
Absolutely nothing.
Okay.
I, of course, had heard of Swarthmore College. I didn't know where Swarthmore was located relative to other places in Pennsylvania. Larry Shane, who chaired the committee that brought me here, famously said in a letter, this is a bolt out of the blue. And it was, in a sense, a bolt out of the blue, because I really didn't know much at all about here.
Can you share with us what the process is for going through that? Now, you say Larry wrote you a letter. Did he approach you first? Did you read about this in a church-wide newspaper? How did you find out about the opening?
Well, the process is a little different now, but 20 years ago, a pastor seeking a position, and I decided that I wanted to seek a pastoral position which involved preaching and leading staff and so forth. You should fill out a personal form, and at the same time, and you submit that to the national office of the Presbyterian Church USA. At the same time, they're getting forms from churches, and they try to do matches. So if you say that you'd like to go to an urban church or a suburban church, then they will try to match churches with you and perhaps send you information forms. Prior to that happening, I got the call from Larry, and I'm thinking now, I'm not really sure whether it was a letter or a call. I think it may have been a phone call. I'm really not absolutely positive on that. I just know that they checked around with other pastors who might know people who were wanting to move and might be appropriate for this position. They contacted John Buchanan, who was then pastor, still is, I think, retiring from Fourth Presbyterian Church in Chicago. We had worked together. He suggested that I might be a good fit. That's how it began.
And when did you first come here?
Well, let's see. I arrived here officially September of 1993, and I'm not sure exactly the first visit. The first time there was an interview by phone, and so I was at home, and there was a room set up with the committee here, and they went around the table and identified all the people who were there, and I tried to visualize that and wrote names down, and then they asked questions.
Wow.
And then I came to visit, and then some of the committee came to visit the church that I was serving in Oak Park, Illinois, and then I came back here and did a, quote, trial sermon at Ridley Park Presbyterian Church, and the whole committee came to that time, but all of this was still veiled in secrecy.
Yes.
I remember riding around town with Barbara Hirschfeld, who was a member of the committee, and suddenly we saw her father, and she said, "Doc, I don't want my father to see you because he'll tell others. The word will get out."
Wow.
So I had to hide in the back seat.
Wow. So we had to have drapes all around, and it was all in secrecy.
Yes.
Yes, we had to make sure that
secret until you come out.
Wohlschlaeger is here, so we have to be careful. Yeah, okay.
What
now,
a name is that?
There you go, exactly. So, as will whoever follows you in whatever year that is have some pretty big shoes to fill. You had some pretty big shoes to fill here coming after Barry Shepherd. Do you remember what the first few weeks were like? How is it when you walk in after somebody has been there for a long time?
Luckily, I didn't know a lot about Barry Shepherd before I came. Now, of course, he had been here, I think, 18 years before I came. So certainly his feet had been planted firmly in the soil. I didn't know about all of his poetry, his books, and things, and those things might have intimidated me at the outset, but I think I just came in thinking that I just have to do what I can do and be who I am, and and take step by step.
Felt welcomed, felt embraced, felt...
From the start. I mean, I wouldn't be here 20 years now if this weren't such a wonderful congregation and a great place to practice ministry. For me to have changed careers in midlife with not, maybe 40 years, but more 20, 30 years or whatever to be in a profession, to be able to serve 20 years or so here has been the greatest blessing of my life and a fulfilling vocational life that I can't describe.
And clearly a blessing for this congregation. Now, as you know, recently I created a little business card that's a handout to invite people to come back. It basically says, thanks for visiting, and we would like you to come back. And there's a phrase on there, which I paraphrase from a lot of different things that I found around the church, including things on the website. And I want your comment about it. It says, we are an open, caring family of faith, diverse but united through worship, learning, and service, helping each other, our community, and a world in need. Can you tell me what that means to you and how you see that throughout our congregation?
I love what it says, and I think it's accurate about who we are. It begins by saying that we are a warm and faithful family, and I get this a lot from people in the church saying it feels like a family. And ironically, now that we've been in Fellowship Hall worshiping for a period of time, there's even a closer kind of family feeling around worship because the space is smaller.
Right.
And
we're sitting in different places.
We're sitting
a lot
in
of
different
us.
places. I anticipate, however, that when we move back to the sanctuary, as grand as that feeling will be, again, because the chancel is out and more among the people, and the leaders are out among the people, that we will feel perhaps a little bit more intimate even in the space that we have always loved.
Yes.
And I think will love again.
So caring family, and
so we begin there, but
yes.
then any church then reaches out. And so we have reached out to community, particularly Chester, our closest neighbors, and a place of great deprivation, but also through our mission co-workers, quote, to the ends of the earth, as we have been commanded in Matthew's Gospel by Jesus to go out into all the world. And this church has a level of involvement, both locally and internationally, that is remarkable. So many people doing so many things. Perhaps some pastors have the challenge to try to get people involved. My challenge sometimes is to say, no, it's okay. You need to take a break. You've been doing enough. And I'm looking at someone right now who has been among those most active people and volunteering to do things that we don't even dream of.
And I love also, sometimes I think when we look from afar, we look at something and it becomes homogenized milk. I often would talk to my casts in musicals and say to the chorus, you're not homogenized milk, you're a pointillist painting, you're all a different color, a different size, a different shape. Mm-hmm. And we, within this church, are also extremely diverse, yet, as it says, yet united through.
Yeah.
Right? So this isn't one doctrine with everybody. We have people that have come from a lot of different backgrounds.
Indeed. Theologically, we range from people who are, we would say, quite conservative to people who are quite, we might say, progressive. We have people who are very far to the right politically and very far to the left politically. I feel that we are richer because of that. And I try to preach the gospel as we have it presented to us in Scripture, and then we need to be about making those applications. Mm-hmm. And I try then not to be so specific as to this or that program or legislative act or something. Those are our challenges, and
yes.
have always been and will continue to be.
As blessed as this church has been to have you here for all those years, you've also been blessed with some terrific associate pastors.
Yeah.
You want to comment on some of those, bring those folks back up to, we know that years from now people will look at this and remember you and the chancel, and we're getting to the chancel, I promise we are, but some of the associate pastors that you've had the pleasure of working with.
Well, recently I was honored to conduct the memorial service for Frank Gillespie, who was beloved here as a parish associate, not officially as an associate pastor, because Frank moved here in his retirement. But when I came here in 1993, as I said in that service, Frank was it. There was no one else because our former associate for youth ministry, Bob Richardson, had left, as had Barry, and there really was no other official associate pastor. Frank showed me the ropes as the parish associate. The difference there is he's not called to the church. He largely volunteers his time or is given a slight payment, but not very much. So I really needed to form a staff, and Frank was helpful in identifying Karen Nelson McCandless as someone who had been here before and who might come back. And so Karen and I talked, and she became my first real associate. She was not full-time to begin with, but she was invaluable to me because she knew the community and the people so well.
Yes.
And so she was very helpful there. And then I think early on we had Pam McShane, who was in the congregation to do some work with the youth ministry. That first year I had no associate for youth, and so
I'd forgotten that.
I worked with the youth, did the confirmation class that first year. I've now married several of those kids. But the program was well set up, and I had a good leadership in all the committees, so it went on. But then we had Pam working, and then we called Mary Alice Lyman, who became our associate for youth ministry, and she was here for several years. So then it was Karen and Mary Alice and I. And then when Mary Alice left, then we ended up calling back Bob Richardson, who had been here before, as I said, and had gone to a couple of other pastorates. He was part of the call process for a permanent replacement for Mary Alice, but the committee chose John Weicker, and of course John is with me now. When Karen left to follow her husband to a new position near Princeton, New Jersey, our committee called Lisa Day, and so now, of course, that's the team, John and Lisa and I, and we are a wonderful team, and met new challenges and bring a new mix of personality and experience together.
From someone sitting in the congregation, I think it's the strongest preaching threesome I started here in 1963, that I've ever heard within our church. The message coming each Sunday is...
Yes, well, not to say anything about any other team, but I certainly would agree that, speaking at least of John and Lisa, when I leave for vacation or go away, and I know that there will be a good sermon, there will be good worship, and I look forward to reading what they've done or listening to it on the
it's nice.
The internet.
Looking back over your life, your family, during the years that you've been here, lots of things have happened. Lots of things happen over 20 years for sure. Are there certain things that stand out for you over that time? I can think of a couple myself, but I'll see if you bring them up first.
Well, first of all, the fact that 2 of our 3 children live within 5 minutes of us, one direction and another direction, is something we never would have imagined, never hoped for. Right. We went east when our last child went to college, to the University of Iowa, to do training in nursing. And the first Christmas, she came home here, which wasn't home, and declared that she really wouldn't be coming here again. Now she has her life here. She's bought a home here. She's a nurse at Children's Hospital, having done an advanced degree at the University of Pennsylvania. The middle daughter moved here, we were realizing 6.5 years ago, with 2 little boys and her husband, and the little one was 6 months old, and he's now 6.5 years old. And so much has happened there. And so, of course, we came here without any grandchildren. We have 5, 3 in Chicago, soon to be in Florida. And I mean, all of that has happened. So it's been a rich period for us.
And it seems to me there have been some baptisms of that family within this.
Right.
That's got a. I mean, baptisms get to me in any case, but to see you up there with your own family members,
yes,
that's got to be very special for you too.
Privileged to do three of them. Yes.
Yeah, that's. Did you marry any of them?
No, I didn't want to do that.
Okay.
I just wanted to be their dad. So a friend married both of them.
Yeah, it's a very special moment being that dad.
Yeah.
Walking right with him, yes. When you first walked into this space, the church building itself, and learned about the music program, because we are leading now to the chancel and the construction. Okay. I promised we would do that. We are doing that. What did you think of the space? What did you think of the music program as it was unfolding? What did it say to you here in this church?
Well, first of all, the sanctuary, I could see instantly was a treasure to everyone here. The history is redolent. You just walk in and you sense the years. You sense the people who've been here, who've built it. I'm feeling a little bit goosebumpy right now. It's majestic as well as intimate. Gorgeous stained glass windows. The sense of the dark wood, which lends an aura to it. And as I said, it's grand, but it's not so large that it also feels intimate. And I think you sense that maybe in a wedding, particularly because it feels grand with all of that, and yet when the couple's together, it's a very close and sacred space. But of course, for worship itself. And Bill Yates, of course, was the director of music when I came. Bob Groders had been here prior to Bill. Right. And Bill and I were wonderful partners. And I used to talk about the Tuesday mornings when we would sit down and choose hymns together. And we would sit here in this room, and sometimes there would be periods of silence when each of us was sort of paging through the hymnal, and then we would come up with suggestions, and then he would sing this and so forth. So it was really fun. And of course, the choir is faithful and good and solid, and we've had a wonderful musical tradition.
Okay, so let's see if I have this right. So one day, somebody says, okay, now the sight lines are difficult in the sanctuary, the organ's falling apart, we've got to do something, let's form a task force. No, really, how did this really happen? How did things get started? What was the process to say, because I know there were several steps along the way, and it was even the name was changed of it, to get this going to where we are today. It's still under construction as we sit here right now, but how did all of this actually begin? What's the phrase about Presbyterians being in order and
doing things decently and in order?
And in order, because we certainly have done that.
Yes. Well, I think things like this begin with ideas that maybe individuals might have that get going. I can speak for a couple of us. I can speak first of all for Bill Yates, and I'm sure he's talked about this, but he said that, we used to have organists from Curtis, and they would play the organ, and he would direct the choir. But the times were changing. The program at Curtis was drying up. We would have to get a music director who perhaps would be playing the organ at the same time, as indeed is the case now with Jeff DeVault, who's a wonderful musician.
Yes.
But it's difficult, if not impossible, to direct from the side on the organ. And Bill was saying that the chancel would someday need to be rearranged so that the organ could be out in the center, that the director would be sitting at the console and the choir could be seeing the organist. Mm-hmm. So there was that piece of it. And personally, I felt from the start that there was a little sort of enclosure that when you're behind in the chancel, we were behind. One of the ways that it came to me and it led to a change in worship was that when I arrived, one thing that was given to me was a package of papers that church school kids had designed, drawn, welcoming me, and they were really endearing and cute. And then in the worship service, I was sitting up in this chair off to the side, sort of behind a barrier, and I thought, the kids would then leave to go to church school. I had no encounter with them, and it felt strange because they had been part of this welcoming process, and then I never saw them. So I began to have a time with children, which I don't think had been part of the service before, but people seemed to like it, and it has certainly held. But so then I would come out and sit on the steps, and so all of those things suggested that we needed to be coming out more, and the leadership needed to be more visible and out in the front. Not to mention, of course, the acoustics with the choir facing each other, singing to the side, all of those things. And I spoke to someone about the chancel and what might be done, and he came up with some drawings which are now quite similar to where we've come, but you need a critical mass and to coalesce, and we were dealing with financial issues. How could you think about doing this? And so in some ways the organ began to drive the project because clearly the organ was dying.
It had whole sections that really couldn't be played.
And so the organist had to skillfully play around, and ultimately places are too deep and broad to play around. Needing a new organ created the opportunity to then reconfigure. So it's really hard to go back and remember every step of the process. I just know that there were a few people at the beginning, and then they did some research, and they presented ideas, and then we took it the next step, and the next step, and the next step. And at every step along the way, we had the leadership that we needed, and in every kind of way.
How long a process has this been? 3 years? 4 years?
For some of us, it's been nearly 20 years.
Yes, bits and pieces.
And even before that.
Yeah.
But it's been the better part of a decade where from the beginning groups that did the research and made proposals to the place that we are now.
What are some of your fondest memories in that sanctuary? Those musical moments, the time with children that you've talked about, ordinations, weddings, things that come out from you. They will continue, clearly, with this new, I keep calling it a new chancel, but it certainly is a reconstructed one. It's a brand new pipe organ. What are some of your fondest memories in there?
One thing I've said that people recall, because I think they have difficulty believing it, and that is that most pastors I know prefer to do memorial services over weddings. And I'm not taking anything away from the joy of a wedding, but a memorial service puts us in touch with our mortality and God's eternal presence. And I think that some of the highest moments for me have occurred around memorial services. I think that the church family really understands its family nature when it gathers around a family in the church to help them through their grief. And so those aren't favorite moments, but they are remarkable moments and moments that I recall most vividly. But just any Sunday morning in worship, I mean, just to be present, to have the opportunity to worship in our sanctuary, the candlelight at midnight on Christmas Eve, and to see all the candles lifted high in that darkness, or Easter Sunday morning with the flower cross, which was not something that existed when I came, but one of the staff members here had seen it somewhere, and that has now become so much a part of our Easter Sunday service. And so the Vidor staccato or the Messiah Handel's Hallelujah chorus at the end and the cross up front and center. It's a wonderful place.
And it's interesting because I know we all must have our own remembrances of things like that, because you mentioned the Hallelujah Chorus. That was a thing my dad and I always did together.
Sure. When
he was here. So it means a lot to us from out in the congregation as well as up front. What would you say, because this is a long process, and because it is an expensive process, and it was inconvenient yet providing lots of terrific opportunities for us for moving out of it and the new worship service that came out of that, what would you say are your hopes for the changes to the chancel and the installation of the new pipe organ, and what it will mean for the congregation?
I hope it will mean for the congregation a sense of more intimacy and connection in worship, as they are talking about it now in Fellowship Hall. One of the proposals that didn't go forward, and I think we need to recognize that this has been a process in which we've made changes and alterations along the way, because initially things that we proposed, that the committee proposed for the redesign of the sanctuary, some of those things were not accepted well by people who were interviewed.
Right.
And so we backed off of some of them. For instance, pews that were at a slant. Interestingly, when we've experienced that in other settings, people have said it's wonderful to be able to see other people worshiping. Perhaps somewhere down the line in another generation that will happen. I don't know. But we're satisfied with where we are now, at least with the chancel and the organ. And I just hope that it creates even a more intense and more intimate, yet grand sense of worship.
So the person sitting in the pew, whether it's the transept, whether it's far back in the nave, whether it's the small transept, what do you feel that individual will feel, let's say that first Sunday? Now, we won't have the organ the first Sunday. It's going to be several months after that. But what do you feel that sense might be as we come there? What are you hoping that sense might be?
What I'm hoping will be what one of our architects has said, that he hopes that when people walk in, they will feel that it's new and familiar.
New and familiar.
New and familiar. That it clearly changes have been made, but that it still looks the way it did, in the sense that the wood tones are still what they've been. The angels are all there.
Yes.
The basic footprint is still recognizable, even though there have been some significant changes.
Right.
And so I hope that it looks new so that it's exciting, but familiar so that it's comfortable.
Wrapping up, in 10, 15 or more years, as people look back to this time of physical change to the sanctuary, to the chancel, the new pipe organ, and reflect upon your years here, what do you hope they'll remember about this time that we're going through?
Every generation has an opportunity to make an impact on other people's lives, on homes they live in, on churches they worship in, schools they go to. This, as someone, more than one person that have said, this is our opportunity. I hope they will remember that we met the opportunity that was ours. We didn't shirk our responsibility. We didn't falter back in fear. And we did this in a time when it was not a slam dunk, as we might say.
Yeah.
We raised nearly $2 million in a period of economic difficulty. Some people said it couldn't be done, we shouldn't try it, but our people responded in initial interviews by saying, if we really want this, we can do it.
Yeah.
And we did want it, I think. That clearly shows, and we have done it. Remarkably, not with a few major gifts. We had some substantial gifts that set the pace at the beginning, but within just about a month's time, we raised nearly $500,000 in pledges from a number of people, everywhere from $5 from a child in the church school to, again, large gifts from people that we might not have expected. to have given. But it has broad-based support. That's wonderful. And I just hope that people will remember that they were part of something significant in the history of this church. The organ that we're replacing was installed in 1923.
Wow.
So it's nearly a century later, and now it's our turn to create a new organ. So perhaps 100 years from now, people will look back on this time, and they will know none of us, but they'll feel our presence perhaps in what we've left behind.
That's great. Thanks very much.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.